King Wise, also known as Wise Shahi in the global world. So we here with another live right here, Freestyle Friday. Another Freestyle Friday edition coming at you right here. So we're gonna jump right into it. So what I'm gonna be talking about today is why wealthy why wealth advice doesn't fit your world. You know, like the traditional wealth advice. People talk about wealth and riches and financial literacy and all of that. And a lot of times it's coming from, the traditional information that usually is based off of people who are starting off with a safety net already. People who are starting off with some type of backdrop of financial cushion, meaning that your grandparents and great grandparents already passed down certain assets into you know the family, and then also it's based off of certain things where people already are familiar with fundamentals of financial literacy, like home ownership, credit building, things like that. So if you don't already have that information, if you don't already know about a mortgage, if you don't already know about the credit scores and uh, business credit, if you don't already know about uh, a credit line, a business credit line, if you don't already know about raising capital, if you don't already know about stocks, bonds, commodities, if you don't already know about those things, the traditional wealth advice doesn't work for you, right? It just doesn't work. And what do I really mean about it doesn't work? Stay with me. I'm going to explain these things because these are some fundamental basics that when you understand these fundamental basics, it will allow you to navigate through all of the fluff. It'll allow you to navigate through the system as well, the systems that are already in place that were structured based off of traditional passed down from one generation to the next generation to the next generation, to the point where now you are entering into a battlefield that's already filled with people who hold position. It's already structured with legacies, and you are striving to enter into this ground or this field of operation and carve out your space that will lead to generational wealth, meaning that after you, and it's passed down to your children and then to your grandchildren and to great grandchildren, you now put in motion a legacy of leadership. Okay, let's get right into it. I'm going to make some parallels. I'm going to utilize some analogies, some symbolisms, and put things in a certain perspective for you to see clearly why you need to pay attention to this aspect of financial intelligence. Because here's the thing: all financial and information don't fit. It's not a universal fit. Meaning that what may work for this person might not work for you because you don't come from the same experience. You might not have the same uh life connections as this person, meaning that this person might already have some type of wealth stability and this person doesn't. So let me put it in this framework real fast so I can make clear sense for those that's watching, because some people just tuning in and like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. So here we go. Okay. And this is Black History Month, so I'm gonna hit you with this part right here to make it all fit together. Black people in America enslaved. Black people in America position chattel slavery, meaning you're property of some white person, right? So white people holding black people as property. That's the law, that's the economic structure, that's the social structure, That's the culture in what is called the United States of America, even in the colonial times prior to it being called United States of America. Most people know that history. Okay, but the way I'm going to put this together for you is going to give you the main things that you need to know and how to navigate today, because that history, this era that I just spoke about, it still affect us today. It has a certain effect upon you whether you realize it or not. So 1600s, black people in America, chattel slavery. So now, in the typical social dynamic of that time, white people hold a position of landowners. They own land because what they did was they made it where anybody could just post up and say, "This is my land." That's how it became structured when the United States, the English people who took over this portion of the land that is carved out as the United States, they just had land to be, this is my land. I put my stake down right here. I'm gonna set up shop. And now we have those that were in the governing authority positions, such as like George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, all those people who became the pioneers or the forefathers of the United States of America. So when they put together the Constitution and they laid out what would be the governing law of the land, we are written into that as property. We are not written into this as citizens. We all know that today. What I mean? Like, many people know that. But I'm going to explain to you how this is so relevant to right now and provide you with the way of how you enter into society wealth building, coming from an underdog position. So, moving forward, 1600, 1700, 1800. Chattel slavery is typically over. There's no more chattel slavery. Now we're going into what's considered to be the industrial age, so to speak. A lot of warehouses is developed, and black people are free to go and do what they seek to do without being the property of someone else. Yet when you going into this environment, it's people who already have established themselves. So what I'm saying is, it's wealth that has been passed down. I'm gonna use George Washington family, Thomas Jefferson family, Benjamin Franklin's family. Like, their families don't get talked about in this day and time. But you got to think, who is the descendants of George Washington right now? Who are the people who descend from Thomas Jefferson? Who are the people who descend from Benjamin Franklin? And what type of wealth situation do they have in the United States? So let's say, okay, the estate of George Washington, Monticello, right? And so that's a land base, that's an estate. Now we're talking about a financial institution that has all different types of economical leverage attached to it. Okay, so now it's passed down, it's passed down, it's passed down, it's passed down. And now here go your family, you know, you pass down poverty. And I'm not just talking about poverty from the standpoint of assets, like physical, tangible assets. I'm talking about knowledge. Because from the perspective of the George Washington estate, the Thomas Jefferson estate, Benjamin Franklin estate, these are people who were the framers. They framed how society will be governed. They framed how you would live your life. And basically, they framed the economic system. The way the economic system is structured in the United States was framed, for the most part, from these individuals. And so it's certain knowledge that exists within this collective family base, right? So the lifestyle that they lived was just a normal course of living out these principles of how economics is operating. Am I making sense with that? Is it clear? Let me make it a little bit more clear. Because they are the ones who structured the foundated basics of how the economy will be operating. These things are attached to conversations, meaning that inside the household, um, family functions or social functions, social gatherings, this knowledge is just regular information that now those that's in their family who get educated on a specific aspect of education, meaning that someone in his family go out to learn how to be an accountant. They go to college and they get they get a degree in business administration and they get licensed as an certified public accountant. They got this information, but they're getting this information from an authoritative perspective. Let me make it even more clear than that. The people who structured the curriculum, the book that you are learning out of, the books that you are learning accounting out of, the professor is teaching you from curriculum, a book. The people who wrote the book, don't you think that these people who wrote the accounting books have a certain way that they express themselves around their family and raise their children up to the point where they are like masters of this? Meaning that, you know, how we can say you got one particular family that specialize in something, or like you hear like the DuPont, they specialize in explosives and stuff like that, back in that era in time. So you could think about the tradition of how they pass down this certain knowledge on how they, um, put together their materials, their product, and it's like unique way they do it as opposed to some other people who probably do the same thing. But in this particular family, the DuPonts, this is how they do it. So it's the same way what I'm saying with the Washingtons, the Jeffersons, or what have you. They have a certain way that they have structured their family environment that's attached to economics. So this knowledge is passed down from one generation to the next generation. It's just already set that way. But us, we are coming into the equation of a free operating society of capitalism without having the specific knowledge and without having specific assets, tangible assets to compete. Because you have to compete in society, right? Based off how they got it structured. What are you competing for? You're competing for resources. So economics is basically showing you how to manage scarce resources. So it's a certain amount of resources that exist within this environment. And so now it's managed in a way that deals with access. How are these resources accessed? And then when you start talking about a country and the country's infrastructure, they put things in place that outlines how the interactions take place. For example, they put in place, if you want to have an electrical company and provide electricity for this area, it's a way that you have to go about doing that. It's codified. It's written down in certain laws. They put it together that way. The people who originated the building of the infrastructure of the country. And the people who put together these things were people who had families, right? I hope, am I making sense? So George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, the DuPonts, um, that's in the early days, right? Rothschilds, these are the early days. These people have families. These people have operations that they put in place, systems that's passed down. So for them, it's a natural process, meaning that when this young child is growing up within this household, they see and hear things as a part of their everyday lifestyle. And then they go off to school and then they get more uh, pronounced information, meaning that they learning their academics, they learning more detailed emphasis on certain aspects of education. It evolves into collegiate education. specialized education. And then they go on to get involved in certain fraternities and sororities, more specialized information, more specialized connections. Elite, it begets elite. And now, when you are talking about wealth advice and people who write books or begin to offer coaching and mentorship about wealth building, it's coming from the fundamentals of how they set the tone from this era, meaning the era of the beginning days of the United States of America. They put in place certain basics. The Constitution is put in place that becomes the foundated reference for everything else that goes on. And when you are part of a family environment, that this is the normal way that you live, the normal way that you think, it gives you the edge on anybody else who doesn't have that. Make it more simplified in what I'm saying. White people who were plantation owners, who were framers of the United States of America's infrastructure, they have their normal way of how they live introduced into a society, meaning that their ideas of life, the way that they see for themselves, self determination, this becomes the entire structure of the United States of America, meaning that they came up with Thanksgiving, they came up with Christmas, they came up with these things that's a normal aspect of their life. Now, here we are, Black people who didn't derive from this Eurocentric psyche or ethos. We adapt to this. And as we adapt to this, we are going through a learning process. We are learning English. We are learning the Eurocentric way of doing mathematics. We are learning how to exist in this society that has been structured through codified legislation, meaning that this constitution has been put in place by these individuals who all got their own interests in mind, and their interest is predicated off of us being in a certain position in relationship to them. You are in an inferior position. You don't compete for these resources. You are someone who actually, uh for the lack of a better way, you supervise the resource, meaning that you manufacture these things. You are the one that's performing the labor. You picking the cotton, and then we take the cotton and we trade it in a system within a market that gives us the edge over other people that participate on that global scale of economics. Am I making sense? Let me break it down a little bit further. United States of America, predominantly based off of English people, right? The British colonized, you know, 13 colonies and all that. And then these people broke away from that and they create the United States of America. But you also got France here. You got Spain. You got these Europeans too involved in this in some shape or form. But the British became the dominant factor here in the part that became known as the United States of America. So now the people who became the forefathers of the United States, George Washington, Patrick Henry, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, these individuals, right? They are English descendants. They descend from England. And then, the French and the English have certain integrated connections as well. That's another subject, but I'm not gonna get too far on that. But now what I'm saying is they already then laid out the trajectory of how life is to be lived in this United States of America. We were subjected to be the carriers of the burden for them, meaning that we toil the land, we carry out all the necessary fundamental basics of, farming, building, and structuring products, right? Cotton. The cotton is picked, And then, the cotton got to be planted, the cotton is picked. Now it's processed to be utilized for making clothes. Clothes. That's the purpose. Okay, cotton is, you make clothes from cotton at this time. And now it's imported, or rather exported, to England. So they competing on the global scale though, because everybody need clothes. So now the United States is able to provide, companies inside the United States rather, they're able to provide an edge on other people who are making clothes, because they're making clothes in France too. They're making clothes in China. They're making clothes in India. They're making clothes all over the world because that's a basic need of the human being to have clothes. But the United States companies are able to provide an edge because they got free labor. This free labor. So the people that's in China, you know, the Chinese people, they are making clothes too, but they can't compete with the United States of America. Really, nobody can compete on the scale of economics with the United States of America because the labor is free. They got so much free labor. This labor is able to generate massive wealth. And the people who are the, you know, the holders of the wealth, they have a lifestyle that they are able to live, and is based off of knowledge that they utilize to manage the whole operation. And so they pass down this knowledge to their children. Their children rise up and inherit the position of authority over the estate, over the business, over the political positions. Democratic, Republican, it doesn't matter. You are holding a political position, Senate, uh, you know, House of Representative, governor, city council, mayor, all these things, right? They are governing positions, they representatives of the people on how they should continue to live their life with structuring laws, or, coming up with new ways to express their will through the law. So it's easy for them to do what they're doing because they just living out what's inside of them to be the way that they want their world to be. They are shaping their world according to the mind that they see for themselves to have, in contrary or in contrast to us being the ones who carry the burden for that. This had nothing to do with, are we blaming anything? We're just giving an observation. I'm giving you an observation, something to think about and look at. Because this is the reason why I'm telling you the traditional wealth advice doesn't fit your world. So you can be reading these books about this is how you establish wealth, this is how you deal with the stock market, this is how you deal with real estate, and this is how you conduct yourself with the bank, and all of that. That is not set for you. You can use some of the information because you're gonna have to understand how did they set this world up? How did they structure this world? And in this case, how did they structure the economy? How did they structure the political machine? And then when you understand that, you're gonna have to come up with a specific way to maneuver through that. And just so happen we have forefathers too. We have people like Frederick Douglass. We have people like Thurgood Marshall. We have people like W.E.B. Du Bois. We have people like Booker T. Washington. We have people who were navigating through this terrain and learning things and adapting and, figuring out how do we as Black people fit and obtain access so that we can enjoy adequate resources, because economics is about how do we manage scarce resources. So when you have people who hoarding up resources, they didn't captured a lot of resources at the expense of our labor, and now we consistently advocated for freedom, justice, and equality, and it had to cause certain people to look at things in a different way. Like, wait a minute, okay, we no longer can hold them as property. We no longer can keep them in this position. And then some people wanted to keep us in this position. Of course, the Civil War, battle, conflict over that issue. And then now, just because certain things change in what you call the North won the war to have black people no longer being held as chattel slavery. They won the war, but that doesn't change the mind of people and doesn't stop them from striving to continue to experience the lifestyle that they once experienced under chattel slavery. So let's adapt. Let's um maneuver and strategize to see how can we hold on to those same outcomes through structuring certain policies, certain laws, right? These are the things that continue to exist in certain ways, whether you know or not. So this is why the typical traditional wealth advice that comes from what George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, that line of information that's passed down within that, and then going into, the college institutions where, they capture the specialization of this information and make it applicable to be utilized for the next generation to carry it out. That doesn't typically fit for you. It doesn't typically fit for you. So you got to be able to take that information because you got to learn how the system is set up. So you got to learn how the credit bureaus assess your buying behavior, your purchasing, and how to utilize paying things back later if you get it off credit, and how do you establish yourself to be able to obtain a mortgage and the different policies that govern how you deal with a mortgage and how you can like refinance or use your equity in the home and you know maneuver with the tax code and all that stuff like that. They put that together. They wrote those things into law. They just took the things that they saw in their mind in the way that they want to live their life and put it into legislation, which produce policies and regulations. And this is where we have the IRS, the tax code, the Treasury, Congress. That's where all these things come into play. They are the managers of their own world. You existing in this world and striving to carve your way out in this world. And when you don't have like that generational knowledge passed down, passed down, passed down, meaning that Frederick Douglass, what does his legacy look like? The people that inherited the knowledge that Frederick Douglass dealt with, the assets that Frederick Douglass obtained, where is his family legacy at? Where the Douglasses at in today's time, right? Do they still carry on from the knowledge base that he um generated, meaning that from his study, from his experiences, and him writing books about our position in relationship to the power base of the United States of America and white supremacy and slavery and fighting for freedom and all those things like that? Did they still carry on with that? What positions do they hold today as inheriting generational wealth? Did they continue to, was it continuity? Right? That's how I present it, like in my book that I'm about to drop, um, Black Aesthetics. So everything that I'm saying now on this Freestyle Friday is like wrapped up in the book Black Aesthetics too. And it's detailed more in a scholarly form to be utilized from a collegiate base, from an institutional base, and for individuals as well. But it's something that now we can have an add-on to our generational wealth of knowledge. Because real wealth starts with the knowledge. Real wealth is not the tangible assets. The real wealth is not a house. The real wealth is not some gold. The real wealth is not anything that's material. That is a result of wealth. That's what I really want you to know. That's the main part of this that I'm talking about now. Why wealth advice doesn't work in your world. Because the wealth advice that most people are talking about is the wealth advice that's is like, how do you obtain some material things that they say are assets that appreciate, that you can make more money off of, that they say, well, your money is working for you, or you got residual income while you sleep, you still making money, stuff like that. those things are applicable. I mean, they operate. It's certain things. It's operating that way for people, right? But for you, it don't necessarily go that way because the real wealth is not the material things. The real wealth is the knowledge. Because why? You could be given these material things and then do what? Lose them. And if you never obtain the knowledge that these material things are based off of, you will not be able to reobtain these things. You'll be stuck. And that is what happened a lot of times when first generational wealth builders, black first generational wealth builders, that when they obtain material stuff, when I'm saying wealth builders, meaning that they obtain homes, they may have obtained some businesses, right? And when it came time for the next generation to come into the position of management of these things or authority over these things, the knowledge wasn't there. The knowledge wasn't there. And what I'm saying by that is a lot of times they just sold these things to get cash. Cash to do what? Spend in lifestyle just for the moment of living, meaning that they might have had a home, they might have had a business or businesses, and they was like, yo, I don't really want this. I don't really need this. We can just sell it and get the cash. And then go do what? Pay for rent, pay your bills, buy clothes, buy food, buy some cars, but not produce systems with that cash. Not take the cash and maneuver it into system building, which I call life based infrastructure. They just spent the cash back with the same people who were once slave masters. So it's called the slave master's children. So you're spending your money with the slave master's children. They pass down, meaning I'm saying the slave masters from the time frame of when this country was originated, the slave masters, most of the slave masters, they pass down legacies of leadership. They pass down the knowledge of how to maintain the position of slave master. See, that's the difference between them and us. We've never had the position of authority in the country, regardless of Barack Obama being the president. See, the president still has checks and balances through Congress, through, you know, Supreme Court. They have each branch is a check and balance. Like it checks the other position. No, the legislative, executive, judicial, those three main branches of the United States government, they check each other a certain way. So one doesn't have sole authority. One has authority in certain areas, meaning that United States Supreme Court could pass, judgment on something that's authoritative across the whole United States. Roe versus Wade, Brown versus Board of Education, all those things like that. Even going back to what was the brother? And Dred Scott case, Supreme Court make a ruling. These rulings are binding. When the Supreme Court make a rule, it's binding, right? Even the United States president got to adhere to a ruling of the United States Supreme Court. See, that's the checks and balances. Now, the United States president could perform on a executive level. They could say, you know what, I'm going to just boom use my executive authority on something and bypass Congress. But that will only exist with that person still being president. Once that president leaves, and even still, it has to fit within the Constitution. So that's the checks and balances. But what I mean by all of this is what? They pass down this knowledge to their children, because now you got John Jay, part of the Supreme Court back in the days. They got knowledge base. So he have a wealth of knowledge of how to deal with jurisprudence, meaning that the legislative intent of this, of that, or whatever. But it all goes back to what? Knowledge. Everything that becomes a law, right? Legislation, right? It starts with the person mind, knowledge of how they look at whatever they're looking at. And they get others to agree, and they come together and they vote on it. And then once they vote on it and it becomes law, it's enforceable through the police, the force, right? They enforce the law. If you go according to what they put together and agreed upon as the law, now the police force comes in to force you to abide by that. Right? Okay, so now, what knowledge have we passed down that will allow us to continue to grow past the system way of keeping us in a subordinate position? This has nothing to do with blame. Let's not talk about, it's a blame thing. It's like a certain aspect of critique, or you criticizing. No. It's observation. This is an observation. And what does this observation do? This observation provides you with a framework. It provides you with an outlook on how to think within systems, how to see in systems. Because once you see in systems, you will stop blaming the traffic and look at the road. You stop blaming the traffic is what it is. This is just the way the road is designed for the traffic to go. And in order for you to get to a different destination other than what this road is set to be on, you have to get off that road. You have to get off you're on the wrong road. This road leads to this. No matter what you feel about it, how you like it or you don't like it, complain or whatever, this road goes this way. And if you want to go in another direction, you have to get off this road. Because if you continue to stay on this road, the destination is predictable. It can be predicted. That's what systems do. See, systems allow you to predict the outcome. Systems allow you to repeat the outcome. Systems allow you to be able to evaluate cause and effect regardless of intent. So let's get back into this part I'm talking about, because I'm going to give you some things that you could be able to utilize to be able to navigate through the way things may exist in this society that you might not comprehend, and then you seeking to learn some information that will allow you to level up yourself, become a wealth builder, and create generational wealth, right? So I heard the brother from EYL say, debt is no such thing as, debt. Don't use debt at all. Like I didn't build it. I don't use debt. And he was trying to say, people who talk about it's a such thing as good debt. Nah, he was like, nah, that ain't. And to me, that's not true. And the reason why I'm going to say that is this. Now, it could be for some people though, right? When I'm saying that, and the reason why I'm saying that is because you could have people, right, that inherited wealth, right? They inherited wealth, and because they inherited wealth, they don't have no debt, right? They don't have no debt. So check this out. So if my grandmother and grandfather, right, were homeowners and business owners, and they have an extensive wealth base of cash and assets. So they set aside trust fund. They set aside certain things and set up certain things that where my mother didn't have to pay to go to college. So she didn't have to get a student loan. So the college was already paid for. So she go get her college education, bam, right? And let's say because they own homes, I didn't have to go pay to get a mortgage. They didn't have my mother didn't have to go get a mortgage and anything like that. Because why? Because it was inherited. So yes, you can do that without that. You don't need no debt to do that because you already inherited generational wealth. But if you are not a part of that, you're gonna have to use some debt, my man. You can talk the talk all you want to talk. You're gonna have to use some debt. So now let me talk about this part right here, right? The same way that when black people who were chattel slavery or pardon self, chattel slaves came out of that in like 1865, in Emancipation Proclamation, right? They didn't come out of that with anything of tangible wealth to allow them to compete in the ongoing social experience of the United States of America, right? They couldn't compete in the economy because they entered into the economy without adequate resources because we never owned anything. We were owned. And this is a peculiar situation. Nobody really has met this type of experience before, in the modern society, right? Maybe not even in the antiquity, right? So that's a debatable. I don't want to get into a debate about that, but let's stick with the reality that we do know. We entered into the equation of the social experience, economic experience without amassed wealth. Nothing that was given to us based off of all the years of us accumulating wealth for white society, right? We didn't get anything that would allow us to really compete. Because when we say compete, right, that's how society set up. Economics, competing for resources. So now for us to go and say, I have the money to buy clothes. I have the money to even buy the material to make clothes. Do I have the money to purchase? Because society is based off purchasing power. You have to purchase things in society. Really, nothing's like free like that, right? So I gotta pay for this. I have to pay for that. I have to pay for my food. I have to pay for my clothes. I have to pay for my shelter, right? So if I leave out of a situation where my entire legacy of ancestry that is here in the United States of America from like the 1600s and now it's like the 1800s and I'm being let free, I don't have no home that's already established inside my family. I don't have a business that's already established inside my family that was passed down from my great, from the 1600s because we were slaves. So now, if I don't get provided anything for what my ancestors have already laid down, meaning their work, their labor, we don't have anything. So now we enter into the equation of competition, striving to get somewhere. And then certain things were put in place that strive to, uh, 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 you know, to repair that, right? It was certain things that was put in place, the Freedoms Bank, you had civil rights stuff being, you know, built upon. And every time these things were being built upon, it was always these, pockets of opposition saying, no, we don't want to give them anything. Like, we don't even want to give them that. We don't think they should have that. We don't think they should have that. That's just how it was. And so we continue to fight and continue to fight and continue to fight. And then what you have in the 1977 is the CRA, Community Reinvestment Act, where the law was passed to say, well, look, okay, the banks got to give access to low, moderate income communities. They got to give access, right? They got to give access. And so this is why I say the traditional wealth advice doesn't fit us, because how many people are talking about the CRA? How many people that you hear talking this wealth advice, these business coaches, these life and business coaches, these people talking about, I can invest in the stock market, NVIDIA. I can show you how to invest in the stock market and you can level up like this. Or I can show you how to get the business credit and you can use the credit like this and the level up and all that stuff like that, right? But who's talking about legislation though? Who's talking about like laws? Who's talking about the basics, the knowledge base? Because they just changed this policy and changed that policy and moved the goalposts and moved this and moved that. And then you still at the expense of, meaning that you have to consistently react to because you're not involved at the table or you haven't created a table for yourself. These are the real deal things that we must deal with. And it's hard to deal with when you got people who come in what I call sophisticated ignorance almost. Like some of the information you have wise, you're not all wise. Because if you don't know a certain knowledge base of history, of how things got to be the way they are, what was the real deal going on with George Washington? What was the real deal going on with Benjamin Franklin? What was the real deal going on with John Hawkins? What was the real deal going on with Queen Elizabeth? What was the real deal going on, right? At the inception of the structural building of slavery, if you don't know what was the real deal going on, and now you enter into this to try to provide advice on what is what and how we should maneuver, you not giving out real realistic pragmatic information. So now people trying to use these things, they trying their best to make a way off of what's being said, and they got false confidence. Because here's the thing, they play the long game. They playing a long game. What is the mortgage on a house? Typically 30 years, right? So when you hear somebody say, yo, I don't use debt, how did you get a mortgage then? Right? Do you own your home flat out? So this $350,000 house, you paid $350,000 for it out of your pocket? Or did you go borrow money from the bank and you put down a certain portion of it? Or did you get together with some investors and they gave you some money and they gave you some money, right? And said, look, we can put our money together, we will buy this property. And you can do that too, but you still owe some people though. It's still debt. It's still a form of debt. Then you got equity and you got debt, right? Let's take those words away, right? Because they both mean the same thing to a degree. Equity is when someone gives you money to partake in the profit of whatever the endeavor is. It's like almost like a business partner. I'm giving you this money right here to get a percentage of the ownership and the profits. Debt is I'm giving you this right here for a return of this plus a certain amount of interest, right? It's like a loan. I'm gonna give you $100,000, 5% interest, 10% interest, whatever, right? So you return me back my basic $100,000 plus that, right? Okay, that's debt. Regardless of equity or debt, somebody's still giving you money that you have to return. The only difference with equity and debt in that instance is the basics of how the return comes about. The debt is a guaranteed, you have to pay the back. It's certain stipulations attached to that where people can put lien on you or demand that it comes back through legal action. From an investor standpoint, if I give you money for partial ownership, the debt collectors have first dibs, so to speak. They the first ones in line that if anything comes down to it, have to dissolve this or time to pay people for something, the people in line from the debt side get it, and according to how they got in line with the debt and the type of structural way that they set up that debt, meaning they got a certain lien, UCC, whatever, and all that stuff like that, right? That's just the technical details. But the bottom line is, it's still somebody giving you something that you don't have in order for you to get something that you don't have. See, somebody else is still. So now some people have everything themselves to purchase something all the way for themselves. Some people do have that. Some people do have they do have cash to purchase. Like they got their own cash to buy something, a high ticket item, right? But the average person don't got that. The average black person don't have that. So if you are teaching black people, you don't have to go out and use any debt, not even good debt is something that you should use. You giving out something that's not practical information, my man. It's not practical. It's not practical because somewhere in the line of your history, somebody had to use debt. Now maybe you didn't have to use it because why? You inherited certain assets already. Certain things were put together for you. You know what I'm saying? Or you could have amassed fast cash by making some investments yourself in some shape or form, and you have amassed cash. Hit the lottery, or you got some type of skill set that cause for you to get a lot of money. Like you got musical artists, you got sports and entertainment. Those fields of economics right there allow you to get advancements, meaning that somebody can say, "I'll give you, $1.5 million cash." You know what I'm saying? And yeah, you can go purchase some stuff like that. But the average person in the practical way that the economy goes, somebody working every day at a 9 to 5, or even a person that's an entrepreneur striving to start a company from scratch and all of that, they're gonna have to utilize debt in some shape or form. So when I heard that, it like, what? I forgot the brother name. Like I don't remember people's names like that a whole lot of time. I remember the faces, but I know it's EYL, Earn Your Leisure. One of those brothers, one of the brothers that deal with a lot of stock investment and stuff like that. I think his name was Rashad or something like that, right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. But anyway, let me say this last part right here as I get ready to close. The same situation that we experienced as black people as a whole when we were chattel slaves and the Emancipation Proclamation came about and we were so-called free from chattel slavery, right? And we didn't leave with anything that was considered to be assets that we could utilize to compete in the ongoing society that was already taking place, right? um that's the same predicament that an individual find themselves in when they come home from jail or prison. Do you hear what I just said? When an individual come home from jail or prison, they are in the same exact predicament as black people when we were let out of chattel slavery. Check it out. When a person come home from prison, right, or jail, and they convicted felon, they cannot vote. They can't serve on a jury. They can't be a notary. They can't possess a firearm. Think about that. Think about that. The same predicament that black people as a whole in America, right? When we were released from chattel slavery and had to enter into the social contract of the ongoing American society to compete for resources in the economy, we could not vote. We couldn't serve on a jury. We couldn't possess a firearm, right? That this is how they looked at us. Now, of course, you could possess a firearm, you could get it, but they had black codes. It's certain things that say, okay, the black man can't do. That's how it is when you come out of jail or prison as a convicted felon. And so it's called being disenfranchised. So the system has always been structured in a way to maintain a slave caste. That's what I'm going to call it. A certain caste to carry the burden of everything else that goes on in society. Because why? When you in prison, you can work inside of institutions that are on the stock market in some places, corporate, entities, but they have free labor going on in prison. Basically, they're paying you 23 cent, 30 cent an hour. In some cases in slavery, the people did get paid, but the payment was so low that it didn't really amount to a competitive pay that would allow them to compete in the mainstream society of economic operations, right? So that's how those things went down. So the key is, what's the solution? Because I just talked about a lot of things that are considered to be problems. What's the solution? The solution is this: you have to learn the knowledge of yourself. You have to learn the knowledge of your enemy or your opposition or, you know, the world. You have to learn the knowledge of yourself, and you have to learn the knowledge of how the economy operates. How does the political, you have to become politically educated, right? economically educated, and you have to position yourself first. Also, like I said, with the knowledge of yourself, knowing your origin in this world, knowing who you are as a black person, or a black man, a black woman, and a lot of times when you speak like this, you have people say, "Oh, you talking," and it's like radical, or it's the type of talk that mainstream white institutions don't want to hear, or we don't want to put this out there like that. But these are things that really mean something to the soul, dealing with our people. And this is why I consistently talk about CRA the way I do in this day and time, because CRA is a major, major piece of legislation that will allow you, as a black person, a black American, to get into wealth generation, to start generating real wealth. That is what that's about, right? And that's what I'm here to like consistently expound on, consistently build about. Because in the world of supply and demand, right, you can have the supply, but the demand has to be there for what you got. And the supply can be a good supply, a quality supply, but if nobody know that you have that supply, nobody can demand it. So this is the dynamics of economics. This is the dynamics of business operations. So I could be saying what I'm saying here on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, right? So now we still got the algorithm. Will the algorithm push this out, or will the algorithm block it? So these are the dynamics of, even though what I'm saying could be and is quality information, will you get to receive it? Did you get to hear this? Were you someone that was able to look at me, hear me talk what I'm saying? And then it's a way that you could boost the algorithm by paying for ads. So you can like say, I'm gonna put some money behind this to make sure that people see it. But now it goes down to, what is your return on your investment? Are you able to make money off of your content? So you have a lot of people putting out content and they chasing money through their content, but they are dealing with a certain aspect of like just foolishness, basically. So, but the people are attracted to it's like candy. Candy tastes good. It tastes good, but it's really not good for you. And you can eat some here and there, but when you overindulge in candy, it disrupt your health. Mess your teeth up, things like that. So that's how you got a lot of candy content, junk food for thought, and it get push to deal with what? Distraction, to distract you from genuine, healthy mental wealth, to distract you from being able to obtain proper education that will allow you to produce a situation for you and your family and your people, right? To be able to level up from those generations and generations of slave labor, of being oppressed in these institutions. And it's not about blame, because why? The blame is like this: institutions, systems, they produce outcomes. You can't blame the traffic. Good intentions are not good enough. You got to deal with the system. You got to build systems. How do you build a system? Stay in tune with me. Stay in tune with Wise. I'm going to continue to show you how do you build systems to navigate in a terrain that's already been set a certain way, and to allow you to level up past those that were set to keep you down. See, that's what it's all about. How do you level past these people that was set to keep you down? And it ain't nothing radical. It ain't nothing say like, oh, it's revolutionary. It's just reality. It's not radical. It's not revolutionary. That's the wrong word with the R. It's reality. It's reality. That's all it is. It's just reality. And what I mean by reality, it is what it is. And we have to do the necessary things that we must do to achieve what we must achieve. Because, like I said, someone just came up with an idea. I want this to be this way. We want this to be this way. They all agreed. It became a legislative law. It became the United States of America. They structured their own system. They structured their own world. This is how we want to live our life. This is how we're going to do what we do. And this is how we are going to continue to do what we do, because we're going to pass it down to our children, and they're going to pass it down to their children. and we're gonna keep moving and keep building. But here we were the whole time. Black people were here the whole time, and we were fighting against the will of someone else because their will was to keep us under them and utilized as the tool for them to achieve their will, right? But it says, you know, thy will be done, right? The will of who? Allah. So we got wills and wills. Now we talking about now genuine humanity though, right? Equality, justice, freedom, justice, and equality. You get what you deserve, right? But we gotta have what you call a genuine opportunity. And to give everyone a genuine opportunity, you must provide proper knowledge. Because when you have proper knowledge, you can make an informed decision. A lot of decisions are being made based off of ignorance and being illiterate. And a lot of that is not just coming from someone who intentionally wants to be illiterate or intentionally wants to be ignorant. It's because certain things has been structured that way to keep you illiterate, to keep you ignorant, and therefore you remain used as a tool and a slave, and you feel good about it because you were given candy. You it tastes good, but it don't feel good after the fact. Your stomach hurting, you know what I'm saying? Your teeth rotten. But at the moment, it was just a moment of pleasure. So, but in the process of all of that, you've been numb. What do I mean when you've been numb, right? So when a doctor want to pull your teeth, right? They numb your gum so you don't feel the pain of the extraction of your teeth, which is pressure, which is really something that will be extremely painful if the numbness wasn't there. So the numbness on the mind of the people is through the distractions of sport and play. These things numb you so that the resources of your community is being extracted where you don't feel the pain, but the results still remain, right? Your teeth gone. You can't bite. You can't do that. Your resources gone. Your resources being ciphered out of your community, but you're numb. Your labor is being utilized to build someone else's wealth, but you're numb. You cannot feel the pain of the reality of what's going on. Freestyle Friday, mental wealth, Wazetics,